Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at the last press conference of the NEC today. With us here we have the head of the NEC, Judge Sylwester Marciniak, deputy head of the NEC, Judge Zbigniew Cieślak, member of the NEC, Ryszard Walicki, member of the NEC, Konrad Składowski, as well as the head of the National Electoral Bureau Office and secretary of the NEC, Minister Magdalena Pietrzak. Sir, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Poland. The National Electoral Commission declares that the non-district electoral commission passed a resolution on prolongation of the voting period. The election silence ended at 9 p.m., as we all know. We should conclude that universal presidential election in 2020, overshadowed by the pandemic, ended up with a very successful turnout. This is something that we wish to thank for to millions of voters who went to polling stations. Dear voters, you may rest now. Now, my big request goes to members of over 27,000 electoral commissions. I'm sure you will now reliably and efficiently determine the results of the voting. We know that you are tired, yet still, a couple of hours of hard work are still ahead of you. The next press conference of the NEC will take place once the Commission has obtained and verified protocols from all regional electoral commissions, and once the result of the presidential election is decided, once we have drawn up the final protocol and passed the resolution on the results of the election. The dates that we gave you before 1:30 p.m. tomorrow are simply not valid anymore. We will announce it to the media at least 1 hour in advance once we have obtained protocols from all regional electoral commissions and when we have passed the resolution on the results of voting. At least 1 hour in advance we shall inform the media about the actual hour or timing of our conference. In terms of incidents that we were informed about by the police force, in total until 6 p.m. there were 451 crimes and offences. Importantly, almost half of them concern damaging posters, 226 is the exact number, or breaches of election silence. In the recent period, in the final hours, we also had some incidents related to alcohol consumption by members of the commissions. Today, around 3 p.m. in Łódź, the head of the district electoral commission reported that one of the members of the commission was most likely intoxicated. Police force were called in, but the man left before that. He was in his home. His breath was analyzed with the breath analyzer, and he had 1.29 of alcohol. In Głogów, police force was informed that one of the members of the commission might be under the influence of alcohol. The police officers came in and carried out a breath analyzer test. The result was 1.02. The person was immediately removed from the commission. These are, however, individual few cases, and as you can see, we are able to immediately react to them. Over to you, madam. Well, briefly, I must say that it was a really peaceful election day. After closing of the polling stations, there were no problems, no disruptions. Reserves of ballot papers were used already in the afternoon in touristic spots and in the evening in many other non-touristic locations. Actually, we were often informed that perhaps the reserves will be needed, and very often they were actually needed in several commissions. Ballot papers from adjacent municipality had to be used. When it comes to problems with voters, most likely these related to lack of people's names on election rolls. Usually that resulted from a situation in which the person was in hospital during the first round of elections and now was released home. However, again, we were able to clarify the situations immediately with civil records office, with municipality offices, or with the postal office if that was the case, if the case related to lack of voting packages. Are there any questions? Good evening, Arkadiusz Świeżuch, TVN24. The conference that you announced, if you're not scheduling it for tomorrow at 10 a.m., when can we expect it? Will the stations abroad not prolong the waiting time unnecessarily, like it was the case in the first round? Well, let me just remind you that the Special Act of the 2nd of July states that in terms of protocols from constituencies abroad, we have to wait for 48 hours max from the moment polling stations are closed. So it will be 9 p.m. Maximum, actually 11 p.m. on Tuesday. From the information that we are receiving, however, the situation won't happen again, but only time can tell. Perhaps we will be able to give you the final results of voting tomorrow. And then we will pass the resolution on the election of the President of the Republic of Poland. As I mentioned, however, we will inform the media at least 1 hour in advance. So I think that you can rest. This night is for you now. It's up to the members of election commissions. Talk FM, what about the turnout? Can we have any final data about the turnout? You spoke about the record high turnout. What are the numbers? Well, the final turnout will be announced when we announce the results of voting. We may, however, conclude from the trend. Let's recall that at 5 p.m. it was 52.4%, if I'm correct. So that's 5.2% per hour, so to say, and add 4 hours to that. Statistically speaking, we should be somewhere around 70%. That would still be record high, even in comparison with the second round of 1995 presidential election. Are there any further questions? Yes, I wanted to ask about ballot papers. You, madam, mentioned that reserves had to be used, but half an hour ago we still had information about huge queues in Jastarnia, the commission waiting for ballot papers in Hell, for instance. Will we run out of them? No. We have printed the exact number of ballot papers, like the number of voters, but It can happen, for instance, that you have to take them from the adjacent municipality. However, as we said, when 60% of ballot papers are used, the Commission is obliged to send a respective signal, and reserve ballot papers are delivered when 80% of ballot papers are used. There were some places in which ballot papers had to be delivered time and again, so there is no risk that a voter will come and will have nothing to put the cross mark on. Just to complement what my colleague said, you mentioned Jastrzębia Góra. We spoke to the commissioner from Słupsk, who is responsible for that commission, and he assured me that ballot papers were delivered if needed, and I was assured that definitely there won't be any situation in which there are no ballot papers to vote on. Final question, I promise. Voting ended everywhere? Is that the case? Do you have any information about that? Well, when we were preparing for this conference, there were still places where voters were standing in the queue. We had some interesting information from Split in Croatia, a huge number of voters standing. We were informed by the MFA about the fact that it might be even 6 hours more, but the council herself is at the very end, supported by the police force. And what about the counting of votes? Won't we have a replay of Manchester situation? Well, in Split it's done personally, so it won't happen again. It's a totally different technique here. The voters put the papers to the box themselves, so it's all about counting the ballot papers. In Manchester, in the UK, only postal voting was possible, so technicalities simply took up the most time. But as I mentioned, during the press conference at 6:30. In the first round, we had 300 people voting in Split. Now it's over 10 times more. Unfortunately, the duration of voting process extended, but anybody who came to the polling station before 9 p.m. will have the right to vote. If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention.